Hello, thanks for joining me today. In the last 24 to 48 hours, Russia has conducted at least 74 Shahed drone strikes and launched 43 missiles into Ukraine, including one Iskander-M ballistic missile. Four of the missiles were Kalibr cruise missiles launched from RFN vessels in the Black Sea. 27 were air-launched cruise missiles. According to Ukrainian Air Force officials, 23 of the missiles, three Kalibr missiles, and all of the drones were either shot down or became lost. So strange, but honestly, I don't know that half of the war stats that I receive are entirely accurate. I'm seeing a lot of reporting that favors Ukrainian forces in all aspects of this war and in a peculiar fashion. That's just my opinion. Ukrainian officials did report damage to energy and critical infrastructure facilities in Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv, and Kharkiv. We already know that Russia routinely targets the Ukrainian energy infrastructure and energy sector in order to collapse Ukraine's energy grid and degrade Ukraine's will to fight. On the Eastern Front, which is Russia's main effort, in the Donetsk region, Russian forces have enveloped Chasiv Yar. This town has essentially been taken by the Russians, as you can see. Donetsk has been completely taken, and then down in the vicinity around Pokrovsk, Russian forces have continued offensive operations there, and as you can see, they are establishing a slowly forming pincer movement to close off Pokrovsk. So you don't need to be a military analyst to see this on any of the battlespace maps. Ukrainian military officials reported that Russian units are using drones heavily in the area. So not the fiber optic drones, but conventional drones and guided glide bombs in the area surrounding Pokrovsk due to favorable weather conditions. Meanwhile, up in the Kursk Oblast, the Ukrainian army continues to struggle to retain territory in and around Makhnovka, so that's southeast of Sudzha. This area here, southeast of Sudzha, is of particular concern to Ukrainian forces as the Russians advance and continue to take territory. And now for this report from ISW concerning Russian mobilization and force generation efforts. The Russian Ministry of Defense continues to recruit foreigners to fight in its war against Ukraine. Sistema Project reported on January 15th that a Central African Republic citizen who fought in an assault company of the Russian 155th Naval Infantry Brigade was killed in action near Novoivanovka, that's in the Kursk Oblast, marking the first confirmed case of a Central African Republican citizen killed while fighting in the Kursk since Ukraine's incursion in August of 2024. The CAR citizen's brother told Sistema that the soldier signed a military contract with Russia's Ministry of Defense in September of 2024, and a source close to the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade's command told Sistema that writers that there are plenty more CAR citizens fighting in Kursk Oblast, but the exact number is unknown. And then another indication that the Russian MOD is looking for other sources to man the fight is a report from a Belarusian paper, Voltak. So Russian authorities are reportedly coercing Ukrainians detained in Russia to fight with the Russian military. An independent Belarusian media outlet, Voltak, reported on January 13th that Russian authorities have been preventing Ukrainians who were recently released from Russian penal colonies from leaving a migration center in Orenburg Oblast for months. Voltak reported that representatives of the Russian MOD have been approaching the detained Ukrainians and offering them freedom money and Russian citizenship in exchange for signing military contracts with the Russian MOD. And finally, in other regional news, Transnistrian President Vadim Krasnoselsky announced on January 15th that Russia will soon provide Transnistria with gas as humanitarian aid, but they did not specify the delivery date or method. So this is Russia winning hearts and minds, as if you remember, Ukraine halted the contract carrying natural gas from Ukraine to Europe. That contract expired on January 1st, so about 2 weeks ago, and the Ukraine did not renew. So Russia is going to expand its union state, it looks like, or at least it's looking to win the hearts and minds of Transnistria to open up. I guess it wants more than Belarus. And lastly, I just wanted to call to your attention, ISW Press just published a paper yesterday, January 15th, a paper titled Russia's Quiet Conquest, Belarus. It was written by George Barros. It's an excellent paper. I'm about 3/4 of the way through. I just got a few more pages to read. But I'm highly impressed with the way it brings to light Russia's campaign since 2020 to reclaim Belarus and formalize its membership as part of the Union state. So since 2020, the Kremlin has sought to make Belarus a de facto annex by formalizing the Union state as a Russian-dominated federated government that grants Moscow dominant power over most, if not all, aspects of Belarusian governance. So that's what they seek. They contrast that with the war in Ukraine and the kinetic style of seizure that they've done that the whole world has been watching in horror for the last 3 years. But under the radar, this has been happening with Belarus, and it's an interesting paper. And it should fundamentally change the way NATO approaches operations and collective defense in the West. And that will conclude today's update. Once again, thanks for watching. I appreciate your viewership. If so inclined, leave a thumbs up or a comment below, and hope to see you next time.
I want to go now to NATO, because in 2023, Congress overwhelmingly passed the bipartisan Kaine-Rubio provision prohibiting any president from withdrawing the United States from NATO without Senate approval or an act of Congress. Will you commit to adhering to Senate approval or an act of Congress as required under that law that you authored if President Trump attempts to withdraw the U.S. from NATO?
Well, first let me say that President Trump has appointed an ambassador nominee for NATO, which clearly indicates his role to engage in that. Second is the law is what it is. Obviously, as you've mentioned, I was a co-sponsor of the law, and so it's tough to say I'm not in support of a law that I hope to pass, and that I think it's an important role for Congress to play, because frankly, it's not just about the withdrawal piece of it, it's the contributions we make towards the power of the purse still resides with the Congress. Now maybe, as if confirmed, moving towards the executive branch, I'll become I'll forget that lesson a little bit. I hope not. But ultimately, I still recognize and understand that the power of the purse is with Congress, and it's an incredibly important power. Let me point on NATO one thing. I think there's a misunderstanding about it. The NATO alliance is a very important alliance. I believe that. I believe alliances can be, and has been very useful. Without the NATO alliance, there is no end to the Cold War. In fact, without the NATO alliance, it's quite possible that much of what today, at the time, today we know as Europe, would have fallen victim to aggression. But what's important for the United States is not just to have defense allies, it's to have capable defense allies, allies who are capable of defending their region. And I think there is a question to be asked. I'm not stating a public policy position, I'm stating a question to be asked, and that is, should the role of the United States in NATO in the 21st century be the primary defense role, or as a backstop to aggression, with countries in the region assuming more of that responsibility by contributing more? Now look, in fairness, and I think the further east you move in Europe, the more money you see spent on the military as a percentage of GDP. But I think there's been broad acknowledgement across Europe and across multiple administrations, both Republican and Democrat, that our NATO partners, these are rich, advanced economies, need to contribute more to their own defense and ultimately to the NATO partnership as well. And that's a demand that's been made by multiple presidents across the years.